Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Numerics with Nadia. In today's video, we are going to start learning about positive and negative integers. And this will be a series of videos. In this specific one, this will be an introduction to adding and subtracting positive and negative integers. We will also learn how to multiply and how to divide. But for now, let's go through our lesson objectives for today. So to start off, we're going to define positive and negative integers, and then we will work into our adding and subtracting rules, which these will be the preliminary ones. We'll build on these in our next video as well, but this video, like I said, is an introduction. And then after we do that, just like always, we're going to take what we learn and practice it through some practice problems. So to start out, let's first define what a positive integer is. So I put a little addition sign so we know that this is for positive integers. A positive integer is a whole number that is greater than 0. And then we'll go through and define a negative integer. Positive and negatives are opposite of each other. So I will have a little minus sign here for us. A negative integer is defined as a whole number that is less than 0. And for my visual learners, let's draw out a number line and let's label where positive integers would be and where negative integers would be. So to review again, right, a positive integer is something that is greater than 0. So positive would be on the right-hand side of 0, as we can see in the blue. And then negative would be less than 0, so negative would be on the left-hand side of that 0 on the number line. And now that we've gone through and labeled this visually, we'll get into our addition rules. So if we add a positive number and a positive number together, we will get a positive number. An example of that could be 3 plus 5, right? 3 and 5 are both positive. When we add them together, we get a positive 8. So positives plus positives gives us a positive. What happens if we add two negatives together? A negative plus a negative. Well, that would give us a negative. An example of this could be -1 plus -1. Well, that would give us a more negative number, right? That would give us -2. What if we had a large positive number plus a small negative number? That would be a positive result. An example of this could be 10 plus -1. 10 is bigger than 1, right? So 10 is positive. The -1 is negative, but it's smaller. So our answer is 9, which is still positive. For that example, we'll go through one more rule. What if we had a small positive number plus a large negative number? Well, that would give us a negative result. And an example of that would be 1 plus -20. 20 is way, way bigger than 1, right? So that 20 will carry our sign. And since the 20 is negative, our answer will also be negative for that example. I know that that was a lot of rules all at once. So let's take a step back and see if we notice any trends or any patterns going on here. So one of the first notes that I notice is when we're adding integers with the same sign, the answer sign also stays the same. So, right, if we had two positives adding together, the answer was still positive, and two negatives adding together, the answer was still negative. So these top two rules that we went over, same signs, right? So the answer sign would also stay the same. But when we add integers with different signs, the answer sign will match the larger integer. And what do I mean by larger integer? We obviously know that a positive number is greater than a negative number. That's not what I mean here. I mean the absolute value of the numbers you're adding. So if we look back up to the rules and our examples, the bottom two had different signs, right? A positive and a negative, and a positive and a negative. In the first one, our 10, right? 10, absolute value of 10 is greater than the absolute value of -1. So that's why the sign would match the larger integer. So when I say matching the larger integer, I mean the absolute value. All right, you guys, now that we have defined positive and negative integers, we're going to get into some practice using the rules that we just went over, our adding rules. If you want, feel free to copy down those rules before getting into this section. We're going to break this section and our practice problems up into adding and subtracting. So for section 1, we are going to just be adding, and our directions say to use a number line to add the integers below. So for number 1, super simple, we have 3 plus 4, and we're going to use a number line to answer this. We know that 3 is positive, we know that 4 is positive, so we're expecting a positive answer. Let's go through. We always start off with our 0. We'll label our 3, that's our starting point, and then we are adding 4. So I'll go ahead and mark that with blue, and we are adding 4. When we add 4, that takes us to 7, and 7 is positive, so that would be our answer for number 1. We know how to add positive integers, so that one's not bad. For number 2, what if we had -4 plus -2? Here we have two negatives, right? Same sign. Our answer will also have the same sign. So we're expecting a negative answer. So I'll draw my 0 to the right more. We're starting with -4. We're going over to the left 2 by adding -2. And when we do that, we get -6, which is perfect. We were expecting a negative answer, so we are all set for that one. And a quick note before we move on, as I marked with our blue color, when you're adding a positive number, you move to the right. And in the red, we can see that when you're adding a negative number, we move to the left. So these are very important. The first two are easy because we had the same signs, but as we get more difficult with different signs, it's really important to know that when you're adding by a positive number, you move right, and adding by a negative number, you move left. So now that we've done a few examples with same signs, let's do a few examples with different signs. For number 3, we have 7 plus -10. 7 is positive, 10 is negative, and we know that 10 is bigger than 7, right? The absolute value of -10 would be 10. So we are expecting a negative answer. We'll go through and draw out our number line. We're going to go out 7, and 7 is where we're going to start. And here we are adding by a negative, so that will move us to the left by 10. And when we move left by 10, we are ending up at -3. So -3 would be our answer for number 3. So for those of you who maybe won't have time to draw out the whole number line on a test or quiz, I'm going to go through a little shortcut method. And in the shortcut method, when we have different signs, we can just subtract, and I'll show you how to do this. So we can just do 7 minus 10 instead of 7 plus -10. And when we do 7 minus 10, we also get -3. And now we'll move on to number 4. Number 4 is -6 plus 11. -6 is negative plus a positive. Since 11 is greater than the absolute value of -6, we are expecting a positive answer. So we will go through, draw out our number line, start with our 0, draw in our -6, and we are going to be moving right because we are adding a positive number. So we're going to start at the -6, move to the right 11 spaces. When we do that, we end up at 5. So that's one way to do it. Or we can do the shortcut method. We can just do 11 minus 6, right? Because the 11 is positive, the -6 is negative. So 11 minus 6 would give us 5 as well. And a key thing about the shortcut method that I want to take note of before we move on is that you should always start with the positive integer first. Since they're different signs, we're going to start with the positive one first and then subtract for the shortcut method. So now that we've gone through the adding rules and done some practice problems with that, now we'll get into our subtraction rules. So to start off, if we have a positive number minus a positive number, we will most likely get a positive number. It depends on the absolute value, but for example, this would work for something like 10 minus 5, right? 10 and 5 are both positive. 10 is greater than 5, so our answer will also be positive. Now, what happens if we have a smaller positive integer minus a larger positive integer? We would get a negative answer, just like this example. 3 minus 8. Well, 8 is bigger than that 3, so our answer would be negative, and in this case, it would be negative 5. Now, what happens if we have a positive integer minus a negative integer? Well, those two minus signs will turn into addition signs, so we're just going to add. An example for this one could be 10 minus negative 6. Those two minus signs turn into a plus sign. That would turn into 10 plus 6, which is 16, and in this case would be a positive answer. So there are many other rules, but it all depends on the absolute values of each integer. So what I want to do is I just want to work through some examples to get these rules and our thoughts in practice in order to fully understand everything and to visualize it with the number lines. So for our first subtraction problem, what if we had 3 minus 18? Both of them are positive, right? But 18 is greater than 3, so we know that our answer will be negative. Let's go through and label our number line. We're going to start with the 3. We've labeled our 0. And since we are subtracting here, we will be moving to the left. So we're going to move to the left 18 spaces. And when we do that, we get negative 15 if you go through and count everything. The other way that we can do this is using the shortcut method. 3 minus 18, we know our answer is going to be negative, but we can also just subtract 18 minus 3 and make that answer negative. If that's confusing, don't worry about it, just use the number line. But both ways will show us that the answer for number 1 is negative 15. And now moving on to number 2, we have negative 11 minus 2. So a negative subtracting a positive. We are expecting a negative answer still because negative 11, the absolute value of that is greater than that positive 2. And since we are subtracting, we are going to be moving to the left. So our answer for number 2 is going to be even more negative, and it will actually be negative 13 for number 2. Now for number 3, we have 5 minus 13. Both of these are positive, but just like number 1, 13's absolute value is greater, and since we're subtracting, we will expect to have a negative answer here. So I'll go through and draw my number line. We're going to start at 5, and we are again moving left because we are subtracting. And when we move left by 13 spaces, we will get negative 8 if you count all the little tick marks. So we know that 5 minus 13 is negative 8. And now we will move on to our next practice problem. For number 4, we have negative 8 minus negative 16. Anytime we see two minuses next to each other, we know that that turns into a positive. So it ends up being negative 8 plus 16. That is a negative plus a positive, and since the 16 here is greater than the absolute value of negative 8, we are expecting a positive answer. So let's go through here and label our number line. We have our 0, we have our negative 8. In this case, the two minuses turned into a addition, so we're moving to the right, and we're going to move to the right 16 units. When we move to the right 16 units, we end up getting 8 as our answer. So the answer for number 4 would be the negative 8 minus negative 16 turns into negative 8 plus 16, and that gives us 8. I know that this was a very, very long video, so we're going to stop here for the introduction before you guys get very tired. We will get into more practice and an additional video on adding and subtracting positive and negative integers next time. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this introduction. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please feel free to like if you enjoyed the video, comment any questions you have, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys next time.